Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and today it is time for my favorite video of the year, which is me talking about all the queer books. Mostly speculative, actually only speculative. I have done 4 of these videos previously. They have become a standard of tune for me, just always. I started focusing mostly on adult fantasy, obviously adding in some science fiction and other speculative books over the years. And now I also add YA books, and it's basically my queer speculative fiction recommendations list. Mostly just which queer speculative fiction have I read in the past year, because all other books I've read previously I've also talked about in previous videos already. And so this video I will try to keep it short and concise, because as you can see right here I have quite a massive stack. Most of these books are books I read within the last year. There are a few exceptions, which are some books where I finished the trilogy recently, and so I thought, even though I have mentioned them before, I thought I'd mention them again now that the series is done, and tell you my thoughts on it. And so that is the plan for today's video. However, very quickly also, once again, let me give you what I personally consider a queer book. There's 3 options with speculative fiction. One is a main character is queer. Pretty obvious. Second one is the world building is so inherently queer that it doesn't even really matter if a main character is queer or not, although in most of those cases at least one main character will also be queer, or at least a good chunk of the side characters. And the third one is if the author is publicly queer. So those are the 3 options that we have, and with that being said, let's actually get started very quickly with a series that I'm not sure if I mentioned it previously, because I'm not sure if I even remembered. Like, personally, I didn't remember that this was queer, although it is, and that is the Nameless Republic by Sui Davis Okungbowa. The first book was Son of the Storm, the second book is Warrior of the Wind, which I'm currently reading, so I'm holding this up because the first one is somewhere there on the shelves behind me. This one has a bunch of queer characters, a few of them side characters, at least one main character, I would say, and it's way too hard to sum it up. It's pretty much a very, I'm not gonna say standard, but like the general themes of the story are like oppression, decolonization, etc. It's also by an author. I don't remember if Sui Davis Okungbowa was Nigerian or Nigerian American. However, he does have Nigerian heritage. And so this world building is very heavily inspired by mainly different Nigerian cultures, but also generally different Western African cultures. And I really enjoy the writing in this. I forgot how much I enjoyed the writing, which probably is because I read the first book back in 2021, and I forgot a ton of the books that I read back in 2021. But the writing in this definitely is not necessarily one that you'll be most familiar with from Western storytelling, but more so from non-Western storytelling. So yeah, but really enjoying it, having a great time. I'm only 100 pages in so far, but yeah, so I have 350-ish more to go. But can definitely recommend it, although I'm not sure when the 3rd book will be out. So far there's only 2 out in the series. Next, let's continue on with some series where I finished the series, or the series has now come to a conclusion, that are queer. First, of course, The Burning Kingdoms by Tasha Suri, which, by the way, I am so excited for. I think it's called The Isle in the Silver Sea, so her new book coming out this year. But this one follows, I forgot the names once again, Malini and Priya. And Malini was supposed to burn for her brother, who is the emperor. However, she refused, and so she was imprisoned in this like kind of monastery type thing. Malini is part of a group that has been colonized by the empire that Malini's brother is currently the emperor of, and she infiltrates kind of the monastery, getting close to Malini, and the two of them kind of start feeling drawn to each other. However, while at some points in the story they have motivations that lead them in a similar direction. At other points these motivations lead them in completely opposite directions, and so it's a constant being drawn to each other. Are they currently enemies? Are they currently lovers? Are they currently allies? And it's just like, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the first book. I loved the chemistry within the first book. The second book, I remember I didn't enjoy it that much. I felt like the chemistry between the two main characters was once again lacking. I read the third book at the beginning of this year and I once again really enjoyed it. The ending made me tear up. I think I gave it like around 4 stars. So overall, definitely really enjoyed this series. Also, I don't know if you can tell by the cover, but it's South Asian / Indian inspired as a fantasy series. But yeah, definitely pick this up now if you haven't yet. Also part of the iconic Sapphic trifecta. I realized recently that people don't know what the Sapphic trifecta is anymore, which we are losing the tales of the old magic. Like, damn, that's crazy that people don't know anymore. Anyway. Next one where I finished the 3 books is Godkiller by Hannah Kana. This one's the Godkiller trilogy, also got done in March, I think. I finished it right away. Like, I read the second book at the beginning of the year and then the third book once the third book came out. Interestingly, for a lot of these I have the Illumicrate for the first edition, and then I didn't really love the series enough to get like the rest of the books in the Illumicrate editions, but I still enjoyed them enough to actively recommend them. Anyway, this follows a bunch of different characters, actually 3. One of them is Kissen. Kissen's family was killed by gods. Afterwards, she started training as a god killer, so she's someone who actively goes around and kills gods, because in the country where all of this is set, gods are actually, and like the worship of gods is forbidden. The second character we follow is Elogast. Elogast comes from a far-off country, however, he was the second hand of the king during this like big war against the gods, where a lot of gods were killed and the rest of them were banished from the country, and now the king has called him again for a new mission that he has to go on. And the third character we follow is Inara, and Inara finds Kissen, asks her for help because she is bound to like a minor god, and so she wants Kissen's help to find out how to sever herself from that god, but also what is going on. And so that is kind of the setup of the story, which becomes a lot bigger in the second and third book. I will say that for what the story is in a lot of these books, the books aren't quite long enough. Like, the first one is under 300 pages, which is crazy for a fantasy book. The second book is like around 350, and then the third book is 400 pages long, which, you know, is on the shorter side for a lot of fantasy stories. However, overall, I still enjoyed them. I enjoyed the character development. Also, this one, like, you'll think it's a male-female romance in the first book. However, all of the adult characters are pretty much queer in this, mainly bisexual in the case of our main characters. So both Elogast as well as Kissen are bisexual, very much so. This also, be aware, this is one of those books where you have a dynamic between all the characters in the first book, and then in the second book all the characters go their separate ways to come together again in the third book. So, you know, in case that's something you want to be aware of previously, because I know I saw a lot of worse reviews for the second book compared to the first one, and a lot of what they criticized was that the characters weren't together anymore. So, like, if that's something that you want to know, here's the information. But yeah, can still really recommend it. It's like a solid 3.75 star series overall that I really enjoyed. Also, Kissen, our main character, does have a prosthetic leg, So there's also disability rep within here. And then the next one I have is the Redwinter Chronicles by Ed McDonald, which starts with Daughter of Redwinter. This one follows Rain, who is the most self-sabotaging main character that I've read in a while. She can see the dead and speak to the dead. However, she lives in a place where death is a death sentence pretty much, so she keeps it secret. However, she's taken in by this order of knights and started to be trained, and so this follows her kind of struggling with trying to keep her secret hidden, trying to make human connections, while also bigger stuff and threats are coming. And yeah, this is also poly, like the series, the main relationship is poly. Rain is bisexual. There's a lot of do I want to be her or do I actually want her type shit going on with Rain also. And I just love this series for Rain mainly, to be honest, because she is the most unapologetically edgy character ever. I love it. But the author is very aware that Rain is just an incredibly edgy character and just like takes it seriously in the way it needs to be taken seriously to work. But yeah, if you don't like edgelord characters, I'm not sure if this is for you. If you love self-sabotaging edgelord characters, then yeah, definitely go for this. If you enjoyed the Nevernight trilogy and like the type of character that, I forgot what her name was, but you, like me, are not the biggest fan of Jay Kristoff, then go for this one. This one's better actually, in my personal opinion. Just say it. So now we're done with the series. Actually, I'm gonna be mostly talking about standalones in this video, not gonna lie. There's a few series, starts of series, so let's get those out of the way first. First I have, I forgot what this is called. The first one is Mistress of Lies by KM Wright. I forgot what the series is called. I'm sorry, but this one. This is a series where, once again, we have polyamory. Polyamory by default is already queer, so, you know, we have that. This one, personally, I think I gave 3.5 stars. It was very rough around the edges. It was a very obvious debut. However, I still think that it's worth picking up and following the author and to see where this author goes in the future. I might also talk about the series like next year after I read the second book, or once, I think it's a duology only, so, you know, maybe I'll change my mind then. But this is about Shan, who is of mixed heritage within a country where that is seen as something negative. However, she also belongs to one of the noble houses. And the noble houses within this story all have like blood magic. And Shan ultimately wants to topple the regime and wants to topple this whole blood magic system because it's very exploitative of the people who do not have blood magic. And then we also follow another character who's called Samuel, who is a bastard who finds out that he... Actually, I'm not gonna say that because I don't know how early that happens in the story. But yeah, he discovers some gruesome murders and he's drawn into this investigation of which Shan is the lead of. And so the two of them try to figure out what's on the bottom of these gruesome murders while also maybe planning a rebellion on the side. So yeah, definitely very interesting story, but also, as I said, slightly rough around the edges. I did really enjoy parts of the romance. I didn't like other parts of the romance as much because there's like two characters who you don't really get to see that much together, so you don't really see where their romance is coming from. But overall, I can still recommend it to you at a point where I'm like, hey, see if this is something you enjoy and if you want to pick it up. And now I'm gonna have to charge my battery because currently I don't think I have a charged battery. So if the frame changes, that's why. I lied. I did actually have a battery that was charged. But let's continue on with some other series. The next one, I actually only just got the second book from my bookstore, but the next one is The Dawn Hounds by Sasha Stronach. I don't know, once again, what the series is called. This is a more so, it feels kind of vibes-wise, it feels post-apocalyptic science fiction. However, a lot of the vibes are less technology-based and more so like mushroom-based. Sasha Stronach also is a Maori and trans author. So once again, very, very queer. We also follow our main character, who is sapphic. I believe she's lesbian, but at least sapphic, in a world where queerness is not exactly accepted. However, within this world, there's also something that happens to people who die violently, often, where they come back to life with like magic powers. And so all of this is set in a port city where everything is alive. Like the buildings literally grow. And then it seems like a bomb goes off. There's like a mushroom cloud being seen in the port. And so our main character is kind of drawn into the stuff that happens in the book. As it happens so often. I'm not very good at explaining books concisely, especially if I read them very quickly and don't 100% understand what was going on, but it's fine. This book for me was definitely vibes over plot. I absolutely love the immaculate vibes and I'm so excited to read the second book, after which I might be able to tell you more concisely about what is going on in here. And then the last one is a novella series. I think there's 2 out so far. I don't know if there's the intention of any more, because while we follow the same 2 characters, the stories are kind of very separate and like they finish up neatly in a way. And the series is, I forgot what it's called once again, but the first one is The Firebor Blade by Charlotte Bond. This is about a dragon knight gone to slay a dragon. And within this world, dragons' lairs have like weird magic stuff that's going on, which makes it very difficult to slay dragons, on top of, you know, just actually slaying the dragon. Like, a lot of times you don't even get as far as getting to the dragon. And so we follow this knight as she makes her way into the lair of this dragon together with her little sidekick. I forgot what knight sidekicks are called. Today is a day. Let's just leave it at that. And all of that is interspersed with like short little snippets of like scientific books or like legend books on dragons and what makes dragons special. And yeah, it's really fun. I enjoyed the second book more than the first one, but the first one is also really neat. And the twist in this, for this being a novella, was also just like kind of unexpected, but also a really well set up twist. So I forgot, I actually have one more first book in a series, although this is technically still like marked as a standalone, but I know that the author like shared on social media that she's working on a sequel, and that is Coal Gets in Your Veins by Kat Rector. This was one of my favorite books of last year. If you saw my favorite books of last year, you will know it already. This is a romantic paranormal fantasy set in this old mining town in Nova Scotia, and it's one of those dying mining towns that like grew and exploded around 1900 due to the coal mines. However, ever since the coal mining stopped, the town is slowly just bleeding out basically, while the generational trauma due to the coal mining factories and like, well, not factories, but like whole thing is still there also. And we follow Laurel, who is in an abusive marriage, as she meets Spencer, who is a mysterious stranger and also a vampire. And as the two of them grow closer, Laurel slowly starts loving herself enough to maybe find the power to, you know, leave her husband. And Spencer, who also has his own traumatic past, also starts healing. And it's dual POV, so it's first person POV from both characters, which I typically don't like. I also didn't prefer it in this book, however, I didn't mind it as much. This is queer, first of all, because the author is very publicly queer. Kat Rector writes mostly, like, only queer books, but also Spencer is very flamboyantly, openly bisexual. And Laurel herself also is bisexual, even though this isn't explored in this book. And once again, it's a deal of Laurel being a character who never really asked herself if she was queer or not, because it's not necessarily something that's okay within her surroundings. But yeah, absolutely loved it, absolutely adored it. Gorgeous relationship, gorgeous exploration of generational trauma and grief, and just growing and the healing that someone else can provide. It's just, if I hadn't been reading this on a train, it would have made me cry multiple times. So I think I want to continue on with my YA books. First I have Hell Followed With Us, which is kind of like a paranormal horror type story. It's YA and it's by Andrew Joseph White, who is a trans author and also autistic, and so that's what he mainly writes. He writes main characters who are trans and autistic, although not all of his main characters are trans mask, I believe. However, Benji is on the run from the cult that raised him, which is a cult that kind of triggered the apocalypse by, like, creating these weird beings and, like, this virus and stuff. And Benji is supposed to be the ultimate weapon. He is supposed to bring the reckoning. However, he runs away and he finds solace in a group of queer kids. They were like on a queer summer camp or something when the apocalypse started, and now they're just trying to survive. And so Benji goes there and tries to keep hidden that he is slowly turning into a monster. I really enjoyed this. I really loved it. Also, thank you to Steph for gifting me this for my birthday. I am so happy I got it. I cannot wait to read the author's other books, except for his adult horror debut, which comes out this year, which I'm not sure that I'm personally comfortable reading it, because it deals with the horror of pregnancy, and I don't know if I want that. But yeah, this one also, in terms of, you know, being aware of stuff. First of all, check trigger warnings for this. But also, like, it's been too long. It's been like 4 months since I read this. I don't remember all the content notes. That basically goes for all the books that I'm talking about, by the way. But one thing that I can definitely tell you is that there is quite a bit of body horror in this. The type of body horror that I personally really enjoy. But if that's not your thing, be aware. Also, it's a YA that I would also recommend to adult readers, because I'm not typically a YA reader. I still really enjoyed this. Second YA I have on this list is Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. For some reason, I'm really enjoying horror YA, especially if it's like body horror stuff. This is about Andrew, who returns to boarding school after summer, and his best friend Thomas and his sister, whose name I forgot, used to be like an inseparable trio. Andrew also kind of has a crush on Thomas. So he comes back to school and Thomas won't talk to him. And Andrew tries to find out what happened before summer, which he can't remember, that they're not talking to each other anymore, because his sister actually also won't talk to him. And yeah, at the same time, there's creatures coming out of the forest that are killing people. Once again, there's also body horror here. However, this one's like the plant, earthy-based body horror. The other one was like rotting and slime-based body horror. It's gorgeously written. It's like, there's a lot of lines about like, if I could, I would crawl inside your body and stuff. It's really tasty. It's really good. Also, Andrew is ace, very clearly at ace, so we have that wrap in here as well. This one, if I forgot to say it, the main character, I think I said it with like kind of with what the author writes about, but the main character is gay, transmasc, and also autistic. What shall we continue on with next? Let's stay with the horror actually, because next obviously I have to talk about Hungerstone by Kat Dunn. This is a Carmilla retelling. We follow Lenore, who is 30, married, and still doesn't have a child, is still not pregnant, and so her husband and her, they bought this manor and they have invited like a big hunting party to this manor, and now they have to travel there to prepare the manor because it's kind of not that great looking. There has to be a lot of repairs. Oh my god. Anyway, on the way there, they find an overturned carriage with a woman in there who they take with them to recuperate from her ordeal. And so Carmilla refuses to leave. And Carmilla also draws in Lenore a lot. Lenore is fascinated by Carmilla. And by the presence of Carmilla, Lenore finds more and more that she just like, she hungers for more. So this is obviously, I don't think it's like a big thing to say it, since it's a Carmilla retelling, it is sapphic. However, be aware, it's not about the romance. Yes, Carmilla and Lenore are drawn to each other, but if you expect like a big love story within this one, that's not it. It's more so about the allure between the two of them. But it's still unapologetically queer. I love it. It's my favorite book of the year so far. It's gorgeous, beautiful, stunning. What else can I say? I said I'd stay with the horror stuff, right? So next let's talk about The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. This is a horror standalone set in this castle that has been besieged for 6 months and the food is running out. And so we follow 3 different characters. One of those characters is Phosine, who is like somewhat an alchemist. She used to be a nun. Now she makes like alchemical experiments and has been charged with trying to do the impossible and to create food out of nothing. The second character is a lady knight and right hand to the king, and the third character, who is also in this castle, and the third character is someone from the past of the lady knight with her vendetta, like her own vendetta for being there. And then one day the saints come and everything seems saved, except maybe the saints aren't exactly who they appear to be. This is a weird book, and it's a vibe heavy book. There's also a lot of cannibalism, like a lot of cannibalism. If you don't like cannibalism in your horror books, don't read this book. I gave this 4.5 stars or 4.75 stars. This was like almost the perfect book. For me personally, it like kept me a little bit, it felt like it kept me a little bit at arm's length, which is why I didn't end up giving it 5 stars. However, actually thinking about it longer and longer, I might go back and revise and give it 5 stars at some point, but I absolutely loved and adored this. If you enjoy like eldritch horror and cannibalism and just like not being really sure what's going on, and like not in the like negative way, but in this like the horror of uncertainty way, this is the book for you. Absolutely loved and adored it. Also, if you don't necessarily need horror where you're given all the answers at the end, because this isn't a book where it then like tells you exactly, okay, this is what everyone was and this is what happened. There's a lot of stuff that's just happening. So 5 more books. Next, let's go to the opposite end and let's go to cozy fantasy. The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. MacLean. This is about our main character who is a phoenix keeper. So she's a keeper for like this endangered species of a specific phoenix. She's like in a magical zoo, I guess. And at the beginning of the book, within another research facility, phoenix eggs have been stolen. And so there's necessity to have like a new place where phoenixes can mate, and our main character really wants to be the phoenix keeper responsible for the new program. However, to do that she has to work together with her rival, who is like the lead in this show thing within the zoo. And it's basically just about the two of them trying to save the phoenixes. That's pretty much it. There's a lot of discussions about like the ethics of zoos and of promotion of zoos and stuff and different programs. I personally like, I enjoyed the romance between the two of them. I personally didn't love like, or didn't 100% buy the rivals thing. However, I still really enjoyed it. What I mainly enjoyed though is that our main character is a socially anxious mess. And the social anxiety is written really well and really understandable. Apparently there's a bunch of people on Goodreads and Storygraph annoyed about how the social anxiety is written. I found it really relatable. And the sapphic romance on the side is just an add-on, to be honest. The only thing I'm gonna say is that the villain is pretty obvious. Like, the villain appeared and I sent Scylla a voice message and I was like, that's gonna be the villain. So yeah, but aside from that, I really enjoyed it. This was one of the first like truly cozy fantasies that I ended up really enjoying, even though it had pretty low stakes. Next, this is actually also kind of horror. It's sci-fi horror, it's a novella, it's Rose House by Arkady Martin. Loved and adored this, gave it 5 stars. It's about a police detective who gets a call in from the magnum opus of a architect who has died, which is a house that is artificial intelligence, like it is AI, and this house calls into the detective saying there's a dead body in me. However, no one is allowed to enter the house except for the architect's old protege, who is allowed to enter the house for 7 days each year, and so she also gets called in to the house. This contents-wise is not necessarily queer because there's not like big talks about the identities of a lot of the people. There's also not big talks about relationships or anything. However, Arkady Martin is like a very publicly queer author living together with her wife, who apparently also is gonna be publishing a book this year. I don't know if it's her debut or not, but yeah. Absolutely loved and adored it. Love Arkady Martin's writing. Loved like the whimsy of it. I don't know if that's the right way to call it, but this book was like, as much as there were a lot of discussions of themes around personhood and identity, it also felt kind of whimsical in a horrifying way. So yeah, but really loved it. Next we have a book that has gotten quite a bit of buzz on queer book internet spaces, or in queer book internet spaces. I had an arc of this, so of course I read it earlier. I loved it enough that I got a physical copy, which is actually quite hefty and quite heavy. But it's When the Tides Held the Moon by Vanessa Vida Kelly, which, by the way, also has a bunch of illustrations by the author inside. This is set in the early 19th century on Coney Island, and we follow Beningo, or Benny, who is or has come to Coney Island from Puerto Puerto Rico a few years ago. And he is tasked with making a big water tank. He doesn't know why, but he is tasked to make it for like a circus, you know, the thing that used to be called a freak show type company. And then he's also asked to help in the middle of the night with something that he doesn't quite know what's going on. However, as he comes there, he realizes that they're about to catch a merman, because that is supposed to be the new central act of this show. And so they catch the merman, and Benny, once he is caught, starts getting closer and closer to him, and it's about the two of them kind of growing closer and trying to find ways to be no longer imprisoned by both, you know, literally in the case of the merman, but there's also a lot of parallels with Benny and like being imprisoned in his identity, with how people see him, because he is not just Puerto Rican, he's not just an immigrant, but he's also queer, and he still has to come to terms with that. And yeah, gorgeous writing, adored the art, it's so beautiful. Like, I mean, I'm sorry, just look at this. Beautiful, gorgeous, amazing, just highly recommend. Again, you know I love the book if I end up buying it after the arc. Then we have another novella. Well, it's like a longer novella. It's 160 pages, so like usually novellas that I read are around 1 to 120. This one's 160. It's Brighter Than Scale, Swifter Than Flame by Neon Yang. This is Neon Yang's newest book. I also last year read their quartet, novella quartet, the Tensoret series. Really enjoyed it. However, I love this one more. This follows, forgot who it is, Yeva. Yeva, once again, is a knight. Again, this year is the year of lady knights. Yeva is a knight who belongs to an order of like dragon slayers. I guess I also have a bunch of books with like dragon slaying lady knights on this list. We love them, okay? And she is sent to this other kingdom where her mother actually is originally from, because there are rumors that they are harboring a dragon. And so basically she's supposed to find out how much is true about those rumors, and as she tries to do so, she gets closer and closer with the empress of the kingdom. And so this is once again sapphic, but also once again Neon Yang is a pretty publicly queer author. And then the last one I have, which isn't as much like literally queer within the story, but once again queer author makes it a queer book, is The Satine Glass by Niveau. This is amazing. It's about Vitrine, who is a demon. And I say not publicly queer because like technically you have one character that uses she, her pronouns and one character that uses he, him pronouns, but neither of them are human, but it's also never mentioned how that would like change their expectations of gender, because gender isn't really like, it's not a discussion within this story, if that makes sense. It's like it's only perceived because of the pronouns used pretty much. But we follow Vitrine, who is a demon who has built this city for 300 years, and one day angels come and smite the city, and so Vitrine gets very angry and she literally spits at one of the angels. And by her spitting on the angel, it lodges a part of her in this angel, which means that he can no longer return to wherever angels live. And so after some time, he returns to Vitrine, and it's kind of about the dance between the two of them, the hatred, the being drawn to each other, literally having something of yourself lodged within the other person while rebuilding the city. And it's Niveau. It's gorgeous, it's beautiful. Like, Niveau has two types of writing. Niveau has the type of writing that is the Singing Hills series, which I do love and enjoy, but which is more, like, a lot more, I would say average. And then she has the writing that is in this book, that is in Siren Queen, that is in The Chosen and the Beautiful, which is just metaphorical, symbolical, lyrical, purple prosy, just like all the things smashed into one. And it's gorgeous and it's beautiful, and yeah, one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book of last year. And with that, this video is probably gonna end up being very long, but with that, we are at the end of this year's queer recommendations video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you pick up any of the books. Tell me, did I make you want to pick up any of these, and which one will be the next one you buy? If you have read any of these books, would you also continue recommending them? If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media, as well as to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, as well as my other book club that I now need to remember to also say, which is the quarterly Crit Club, where we'll read a queer book actually next, which is The Water Outlaws. Will be linked down below, so go and check those out, and I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!